Our focus for this lesson today is going to be looking at a strategy that we can use to work on finding quotients of two-digit divisors. And so we're really going to be looking at how we can model, and we're going to use an area model. So if you go to your Solve and Share on page 251, I'll walk you through what an area model is going to look like. So your Solve and Share says a parking lot has 270 spaces. Each row has 18 parking spaces. How many rows are in this parking lot? And then it says solve this problem any way we choose, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce to you guys the area model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to draw a rectangle or a square. I'm just going to draw a quadrilateral. We'll go with that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my value that I know. So I'm just going to write up here 270. So I know that I'm going to do 270. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my my 18, and I'm going to write 18 right here. And then what I'm going to be looking for is I'm going to be looking for if I have 270, so my area is going to be 270, I first want to know how many tens I'm going to have to find. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to divide my rectangle in half, and I'm going to look at how many tens I have. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write in here, I'm going to write 270 because that's what I'm starting with. So I'm going to do 270, and I need to think how many tens I can get. So 18 times how many tens is going to get me to 270. And so when I look at that, it's going to be 110. So up here, I'm going to write 10. Then I'm going to multiply 18 times 10. And when I multiply 18 times 10, I'm going to get 180. And I'm going to write that underneath my 270. And then I'm going to subtract. So when I subtract, I'm going to do 0, subtract 0, 0, cross off the 2, regroup the 1. So it becomes 17, subtract 8. So I'm going to get 90. So now I have 90. And then I'm going to come over into here, and I'm going to take my 90, and I'm going to write it in my next half of the rectangle. So this half now represents 180. This now represents 90 because that's what I had left. Okay. So now I need to figure out how many 18s it's going to take me to get to 90. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some work with that. I may have to do some guess and check. And so when I have to do guess and check with my math facts, 18 and 90, I look at this and okay, 90 is a pretty large number. So I'm just going to pick a math fact for 18, and I'm going to do this. And I like to always start with 5. I always like to start with a halfway point, and then from there I can move up or down. So 5 times 8 is going to be 40. So I put down the 0, I regroup the 4. 5 times 1 is going to be 1, plus 4 is going to be 90. So here I'm going to write 5. So I have 5 ones. So this is my ones place value. So I have 110, 5 ones, and then I'm going to subtract 90 from down here, and I end up with 0. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add my tens to my ones, and that will give me my quotient. So my answer is going to be 15. So that is one way that I can model my thinking. I'm going to use that area model. Okay, go ahead and flip the page. So let's take a look at your problem on page 252. And it says Emily has a rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw my rectangle. That garden with an area of 360 square feet. So I'm going to do 360 down here in the corner because I'm going to subtract from that. The length of her garden measures 20 feet. So I'm going to write 20 out here because it is my divisor. How many feet wide is her garden? Okay, so what I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at my number of tens, and then I'm going to look at my number of ones. So I'm thinking to myself, how many tens can I multiply 20 by to get me near 360? So I can only multiply 20 by 110. Because if I multiply 20 by 2 tens, look what happens when I multiply 20 by 2 tens. So if I do 20 times 20, that gives me 400. That's too big. 400 is larger than 360, so I can't do 2 tens. I can only do 1 10. So then I multiply 20 times 1, 10. So I'm going to do 20 times 10. And when I do 20 times 10, I get 200. So I'm going to write 200 underneath my 360, and then I'm going to subtract. So when I subtract, I'm left with 160. So 160 comes over here into the other half of this rectangle. And then from here, I'm going to now look at how many ones it's going to take for me to multiply by 20. That's going to get me near 160. So I look at the 2, I look at the 16. 2 goes into 16 8 times, so it's going to take 8 ones. So 20 times 8 ones is going to be 160. When I subtract, I don't have anything left. My next step is going to be to add my 10 to my ones, and when I do that, I get 18 as my answer. So the garden is going to be 18 feet wide. Okay. If you take a look at your convince me, so the convince me already has the problem somewhat set up. So I have 12 as my divisor. My original quotient was going to be 408. And I found that I could get 3 tens. So if I multiplied 12 times 30, I got 360. When I subtracted that, I got 48. And now I'm looking for how many ones can I use. So I have X ones to where I can find 48. So what do I multiply 12 by? That's going to get me as close to 48 as I can. And when I do this, I'm going to do 12 times 4. So X is going to equal 4 because 12 times 4 is 48. And when I subtract, I don't have a remainder. So X is going to equal 4. So I'm using 4 ones. My quotient then would be 30 plus 4, which would be 34. Okay, let's move on to number 1 and find the missing numbers. So if I take a look at the missing numbers, my problem that I have is I have 154 and I'm dividing that by 11. So I'm going to build my area model. And they've given me some information already. So I have 11 and I start with 154 and I am subtracting 110. And when I subtracted 110, I don't know what that answer is yet, but they gave me over here 44, subtract 44. So I need to find the answer for down here. I need to find my answer for down here. I need to find the value that's going to go in here and the value that's going to go in here. And then that will give me my total quotient. So I have to figure out how many tens I multiplied 11 by to get to 110. So again, this one is pretty simple because I just added a 0 here. And when I just add a 0, that means I just multiplied by 10. And when I subtract 110 from 154, I get 44. That is the same answer that's here. So the 44 got moved over here. 11 times 4 is going to equal 44. So I have a 0 for my answer there. And so 110 is what you'll have written down, plus 4 is going to be equal to 14. So my answer for 154 divided by 11 is equal to 14. So let's take a look. I'm going to jump over to number 3 and I'm going to use the model. So I have 156 and I'm going to divide that by 12. So I go ahead and I build my area model. And so when I build my area model, again, this side's going to represent my tens place value. This is going to represent my ones place value. Okay. And I write it a little bit different. I know that it has tens up there, but I go ahead and I write out the tens. That way I can start seeing it. It will help me when I go to multiply. So I have 156 subtract 120. And when I do this, so I'm going to just stop right there. 12 times 10 is going to get me to 120. And then what's left is going to be, I'm going to do 6 subtract 0, I get 6. 5 subtract 2, I get 3, so I have 36. 36 comes over into my next column, and I'm going to do 36 subtract. And then I have to figure out how many ones I multiply 12 by to get to 36. So it's going to be 12 times 3. So 12 times 3 is going to be 36. 36 subtract. 36 is going to be 0. I add together my 10s and my 1s. 10 plus 3 is going to be 13. So 156 divided by 12 is going to be 13. 682, and I'm going to divide that by 22. So I go ahead and I build my area model. And if you want to make it to where your this value is a little bit smaller, go ahead and do that. I'm going to do 682. I'm going to put that here. 22 is going to go off on the side. And now I have to look at how many 10s I'm going to multiply 22 by to get me near 682. So to do this, give you strategy, I'm just going to look at the 2 here, and I'm going to look at the 6 there. So if I multiply 22 by 3 10s, so I'm going to multiply that by 30. 22 times 30, well, 22 times 3 is going to be 66. And then I'm going to add on that 0 is 660. So in this case, 30 will work because 660 is smaller than 682. And then I'm going to subtract 660 from 682, and I'm left with 22. I bring the 22 over into my next column, and I look at how many ones I have to multiply 22 by to get to 22. Put my plus sign here. My answer is 1, 1. I'm going to multiply 22 times 1. So I'm going to do subtract 22. I get an answer of 0. 30 plus 1 equals 31. So 682 divided by 22 is equal to 31. Let's take a look at our last problem. So our last problem that I have is I have 143 divided by 11. Go ahead and build my area model. Separate it out. 143 I'm going to put right here. 11 I'm going to put off onto the side. I look at how many 10s I multiply 11 by. That's going to get me near 143. The answer is 110. So I'm going to write 10. Go ahead and put my addition symbol so it's done. 11 times 10 is going to be 110. I'm going to subtract, and I'm left with 33. I bring 33 over, and I look at how many times or how many ones I have to multiply 11 by to get to 33. 11 times 3 equals 33. So then I'm going to subtract. I get 0. I'm going to add 10 plus 3. I get 13. So 143 divided by 11 is going to be 13. So you're going to use the area model. I'm going to start by putting my dividend on this side. Look at how many 10s I multiply by my divisor. Subtract. Take this value, put it over in my next column. Look at how many 1s I need to multiply my divisor by. Subtract. Add the 2 values at the top together. That will give you your quotient. So now you know how to use area models to help you find quotients of 2-digit divisors. What we are going to do is going to be a paper practice, so you are not going to complete the practice in your book. You're going to do this on a piece of paper so you have room to show me your understanding of the area model.